It's an honor to welcome Reverend James Lawson to Fresno State. I would like to thank Dr. Vina Howard for organizing his visit and bringing to our campus such a distinguished guest. I would also like to thank our co-sponsors, the Henry Madden Library, the Womack Fund, the Ethics Center, the College of Arts and Humanities, Peace and Conflict Studies Program, Philosophy Department, the President's Commission on Human Relations and Equity, the Cross-Cultural and Gender Center, the United Hindu Coalition of Central California, which are first-time donors, and we appreciate that, Africana Studies, the Harnish Fund, the Ridley Peace Center, and the Gandhi Memorial Education Fund. Please give them a round of applause. In addition, I would like to sincerely thank our Provost, Lynette Selesny, for her inclusive advocacy, her sense of justice, and support in having Reverend James Lawson visit Fresno State. Thank you. So I'm a professor of poetry. That's my original home department, where Nora and I came from in MCLL. And allow me a minute to elaborate on the meaning of Reverend Lawson's visit tonight. I value and cherish this day because it took thousands of years to arrive to Fresno. That really is what it is. To talk about the meaning of this moment, I would like to tell you about a new poem from Alice Walker called Prayer to the Great Awareness. I love the ending of this poem, which I will share with you briefly. And it goes like this: "O great and everlasting awareness, I have been with you while looking for you all my long life. And here you turn up today, as you do every day, as myself, all the awakened women, children and men in the world, and everything else." That's the ending of her poem. Allow me one more minute, then, to explain this briefly in relationship to our esteemed guest. When we cherish the present moment, we become mindful of what Alice Walker calls the great and everlasting awareness. This great and everlasting awareness is a set of eyes that perceives the present moment as a boundless potential of our future. Reverend James Lawson's presence here with us in this room, which took so many thousands of years to happen, represents the potential of the becoming of our future that is anchored by the knowledge of our historical past that provides us, in turn, with a vision that is beyond the ordinary. So that's the meaning of his visit here tonight. Thank you, Reverend James Lawson, for sharing your presence with us here at Fresno State. I would like now to invite our Provost, Dr. Lynette Selesny, to the podium to welcome our esteemed guest.
Thank you, Dean, and good evening to all of you. A very warm welcome. And Reverend Lawson, thank you very much for honoring us here in Fresno. Thank you for bringing your heart and spirit of peace to us at this very important time. It's a great privilege to have you here. And it's a privilege and pleasure to see our campus and community come together to welcome dialogue and discussion on this very important issue. Tonight, we not only welcome that conversation, we welcome and celebrate Reverend James Lawson Jr., an icon and practitioner of peace and change and nonviolence. Reverend Lawson is widely recognized as the pioneer of nonviolence in the American civil liberties movement. Although we are here to listen and celebrate the accomplishments of our campus community, and in particular Reverend Lawson, we remain conscious that there is still work and conversations to foster. Fresno State has several programs that focus on issues of conflict, dignity, and equity. Many on campus are dedicated to the issues of justice and equity, including our students, our amazing students. And I see there are many students here tonight, as well as our remarkable faculty. Reverend Lawson's major strategic work involved college students who were ready to defend, discuss, and even defy for human dignity and equity. And we take inspiration from Reverend Lawson, for his work in the civil rights movement is legendary and exemplary. I would also like to recognize the leadership and inspiration of my esteemed colleague, Professor Vina Howard. What a delight it is to serve alongside you. From the Department of Philosophy, she is the organizer of this week's events, and for taking stellar leadership in expanding our Peace and Conflict Studies program here at Fresno State. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know that we share that vision, and we welcome opportunities for all of our community, and in particular our students, to share in that vision. It is not surprising that our guest, Reverend Lawson and Professor Howard, have connected to offer this very special event tonight. Dr. Howard's scholarship focuses on India's religious tradition and Gandhi's philosophy. In fact, her research focuses on the spiritual roots of Gandhi's nonviolence movement, a key tenet and inspiration to Reverend Lawson's accomplished work. Again, I would like to thank all of you for caring for our community, for your commitment to peace, and for being here tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm so grateful for our provost's kind remarks and for making this event her priority. When I called her office a few weeks ago about today's event and her schedule, I was told that she had an appointment in Florida this day, but she chose to be here. Provost Leslie is an ideal leader who leads through example. I appreciate her leadership, clarity of vision, and her deep care for her students, faculty, and other Fresno State community members. She has been an inspiration for me. Thank you. And Dean Jimenez Sandoval, I am grateful for your support and guidance and your beautiful poetry. You have been a great exemplary leader who is dedicated to uphold the values of humanities for developing mature, active, and compassionate citizens. You also represent these traits in your character and in your actions. Thank you. So I would also like to welcome all of you. It is wonderful to see our provost, deans, community members, faculty, and of course, so many of our students. They make me so proud. We are grateful for the co-sponsorship of so many on-campus and community organizations. I would like to give my special thanks to Dr. Fiala, the chair of Department of Philosophy, for his support and endeavor in this endeavor. And I also like to thank Dr. Kapoor for starting Peace and Conflict Studies program at Fresno State and helping bring Gandhi's and other peace leaders' statues to our Peace Garden. Thank you, Dr. Kapoor. The Peace Garden was one of the reasons that I joined Fresno State in 2014. I had a couple of options, but I chose Fresno State. If you haven't visited our Peace Garden, please put in your to-do list for some weekend or some afternoon. It's quite nice. So before I introduce our Reverend James Lawson, I have a few quick announcements. First, since there are so many students here, so currently PAX program is housed in the Department of Philosophy and offers a minor in Peace and Conflict Studies. The information about the program is available in the back of the tables, so if you go back there, you'll find it. You can also contact me or the Department of Philosophy for further information. Also in the back, there are sign-in sheets for any students wishing their professors know that they are here, and especially they're looking for extra credit. And we'll have question answers after Reverend Lawson's lectures. But students will be given the chance to ask questions first, because Reverend Lawson's work has been primarily with students. So students, please think about your questions and write them as you're listening to the lecture, and be ready to ask your questions. Also, after the Q&A, Reverend Lawson graciously has agreed to be available for signing books. And the book, this is Nonviolence and Social Movements, is available in the back, and I think only a few copies are left now. The cost is $17, cash only. Finally, we're hoping this is the inaugural lecture in the newly forming Peace and Conflict Studies lecture series. So be on the lookout for more to come. We appreciate your continued support. Contact me if you would like to be involved in planning future events. So now, the moment that we all have been waiting for. It is my honor and privilege to introduce Reverend James Lawson, Jr. So I have been studying Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence for many years. During my study, I came across a documentary titled A Force More Powerful. And this documentary has 6 episodes. And one of the episodes of the documentary focuses on Reverend James Lawson's strategic workshops to train students to confront segregation in the downtown Nashville in 1960s. He sacrificed much in service to equality, peace, and justice. He chose to go to prison instead of war. He suffered physical assaults and verbal humiliation during protests. I was so impressed by Lawson's strategy and his innovative methods of nonviolent resistance that I felt that I was in the presence of an American Gandhi. I wanted to meet him, but I didn't know how to go about it. Reverend Lawson does not have an agent. He doesn't do blogs. He doesn't have a Facebook page. He doesn't do Twitter. So this was quite challenging. If you want to know the more story, you can talk to me. But now here we are, more than a decade after, when I had my first viewing of the documentary, and he is with us. As they say, dream big, they may come true. So Reverend Lawson learned Gandhian tactics of nonviolence during his visit to India in 1953. He told me that he was studying them before 1953 when he was in college in 1947, much before Martin Luther King Jr. visited India. His work in the civil rights movement is legendary. He was invited by Dr. King to join him in his fight to end injustices and oppression. Dr. King called Reverend Lawson a great theoretician. Reverend Lawson developed unique tactics to desegregate Nashville and much of the South, so that was lunch counter sit-ins. What I found intriguing in his method was his unique and innovative training to prepare student activists. I believe that Gandhi's methods of nonviolence and soul force became known to the world because of Dr. King and Reverend Lawson's adaptation of Gandhi's philosophy in a new context. But it wasn't just the U.S. South where he worked. He also has worked nonviolently for peace and justice for workers in hotels and field works, including working alongside Cesar Chavez. And he's still active on behalf of students today, fighting for their rights to education here in the U.S. He teaches at CSU Northridge, isn't that impressive? And UCLA's Center for Labor Research and Education. So in the last few months, I have spoke to Reverend Lawson many times on the phone, and I felt I was listening to the voice of love, the voice of truth force. Love that has the power to overcome hatred, confront the forces of injustice and inequality. We are so fortunate to have Reverend Lawson with us at Fresno State. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Reverend James Lawson.
Well, I appreciate the warmth with which I have been welcomed here in Fresno and at Fresno State yesterday and today. And I appreciate so much of what I've heard, especially the people from the faculty who've been here and who've supported this effort. The provost, the president, the dean of the Schools of Arts and Science, Professor Howard, in the Department of Philosophy, and the numbers of students that I've seen while here. I have to say that in the light of the people and the welcome that I've received, that I would suspect that Fresno is a place where I could live and work fairly easily and comfortably. Might get me in trouble if I were to do that, but nevertheless. But that's a part of the lesson that I've learned across the years, namely that human beings are human beings wherever they are. I actually, after college, decided I wanted to live outside the country in order to shed some of the stuff of a USA culture and recognize another set of people and so forth. In prison for 13 months in 1951-52, I discovered that all kinds of men who were incarcerated for many reasons, and the people who were considered dangerous in the cell block in which I was lodged for 5 months because I was a troublemaker, according to the prison authorities, that human beings are fundamentally the same. Not only our DNA and our gene path, but we have allowed for too long certain kinds of mythologies to keep us from acknowledging our basic humanity and from pushing to make that humanity the common journey of us all. So I'm very pleased to be here, and I want to see how many students are here. Can I see hands? Oh, okay. Yeah, a lot of students here. Okay. I saw a number of folk with white hair like mine, and I wasn't sure what the contrast is, but the students outnumber us. I want to this evening, and I've had a lot of trouble with what I was going to say this evening because I've been here for a couple of days and there have been a number of settings, one-on-one, and a number of settings with other people. And so I'm not clear in my own head yet exactly what I want to say and do, but I'm going to anyways set a topic. And the topic that I've chosen is the Rosa Parks struggle and changing our society. And I wanted to add a subnote to it, opposing Trumpism and getting back on the track of creating a society of equality, liberty, and justice for all. Not allowing Trumpism and the divisiveness in our own country and what they call the political division to stop ordinary people like ourselves from dreaming large dreams and engaging in the 21st century in this experiment to be a people who are self-governing, and recognizing that the forces of history that we have come through are forces that continue to want to prevent us from making that experiment work. We need to know the extent to which the USA experiment between 1765 and 1776 is the most important event of history that began to challenge the idea that we human beings must be governed from the top down with patriarchy and monarchy and tyranny. That we human beings cannot be trusted to know who we are, to discover who we are, and to use that knowledge for the pursuit of small societies and larger societies, of families and extended families that can reflect the magnificence of the gift of life that is ours. And so that's my topic, Rosa Parks struggle. And I could say then in shorthand, and our struggle. I use this term, Rosa Parks struggle, because I want you to separate what I like to say this evening from the way in which the nation and many academics have considered what's called the civil rights movement. In some ways, I maintain, as one who was in the middle of it for 17 years, that using the term the civil rights movement is a way of trying to preserve a kind of racism, because it allows for too many American people, too many people in this land, then to see what happened between 1953, 73, and then into the 70s and 80s and 90s, to see that as pertaining only to people of color, only to black Americans, and not to the whole nation. I use the term Rosa Parks struggle to indicate to you the extent to which that movement then was a massive umbrella movement under which there were many facets and many dimensions. I have in my own study and reading and reflection isolated 20 different dimensions of that struggle then, of which the one that I represent, Martin King represents, Rosa Parks represents, was but one, and perhaps the far more essential, because we moved out of the way of thinking primarily in terms of legal desegregation or legal legitimizing segregation in the with the Constitution, which was an important strategy. There was, of course, before 53, the beginnings of cases on school desegregation where black parents insisted in various parts of the country that the public education needed to do some basic reform concerning the way in which they approach black youngsters and other youngsters as well. But the Rosa Parks struggle offered a variation of enormous importance that was not in the 50s and 58 and 60 understood. And it was this. Women in Montgomery, Alabama insisted that the bus segregation needed to be changed. They reported on the indignity of that system of segregated busing. They reported on the way in which, because of the segregation laws and customs and spirituality, they were treated with such hostility in riding the bus to shop, riding the bus to go to work, riding the bus to go to schools or whatnot. And they insisted before 1955 that that indignity was the heart of the problem of the racism of the United States. That was a different kind of an agenda. And Rosa Parks was the key to it. She was, before 1955, an organizer, a devoted member of the AME Church, St. Paul AME Church in Montgomery. She was an organizer for the NAACP. She was a counselor to the youth branch of the NAACP. She organized one of the task forces that protested in the Montgomery area the rape of black women, especially the rape of a young housewife and mother just a few miles outside of Montgomery. She was bold enough with her gentle spirit, and I met her many, many times across those years, and through her death. She was a gentle spirit, but it was a gentle spirit with a stubborn will, that it is not right to subjugate some people to all sorts of indignities and fears and animosities and prohibitions of what they can do and what they can be and where they can live and the rest of it. She never compromised with the notion that the United States of America was on the wrong track with Jim Crow law and practice, which began, at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century. You need to understand that the United States basically deserted the creed of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, that all are endowed with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That was literally deserted at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century because segregation and dark codes and discrimination became a part of a major social thrust of the people of our land, who felt that they were superior to women and that they were superior to people of color, that they were superior to the poor, that they were superior to people who did not have their Christian religion even. That was a movement that pushed hard, harder than what the nation wants to acknowledge. 6,000 black men mostly were tortured and lynched in the United States publicly across the land, especially in the Southeast and also in the part of the world where I grew up in the Midwest. 6,000. That excludes those who were incarcerated and killed by the police in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And black people were knocked off balance after the Reconstruction by that. And Rosa Parks' struggle represents then the explosive spark that became the first organizing emerging campaigns to push back against allowing our nation to become a nation of segregation and hopelessness for millions of people. It was the first organized campaign, and you need to understand it. That's why I call it the second American Revolutionary Movement. Why some historians, black historians, call it the Black Freedom Movement. Why I insist that that movement began because of the aspirations and the visions and the hearts and minds and spirits of many people like myself who knew that it was in contradiction to the purpose of history, and that it was in contradiction to the will of God, and that it was in contradiction to the deepest philosophies of life, both here and around the world, both modern and ancient. A revolutionary member of the Self-Determination Party, I do not know where, but he was a poet in Africa, and a part of that group of people in the late 50s, early 60s, who were beginning to try to see how they can move towards self-determination. It's a magnificent story that has not yet really been told or recovered for our world to know. And this poet, man of aspirations, said something like this in a gathering: I am a citizen of a country that does not yet exist. And all who want a different sort of nation, different sort of Fresno or California, or a different sort of Delta of Mississippi, all who aspire must have that sensibility, if they will get in struggle, that I am a citizen of a country that does not yet exist. I see it in some of your faces. I see it in people across the earth. I see it in struggles that are at the local level in many ways. I hear it. I sense it in some political aspects in Europe and elsewhere. I see it in the United States trying to appear. But there are forces in our nation that we do not understand, that I call the forces of spiritual wickedness, that are determined that that nation, rooted in equality and liberty and justice and the beloved community for every boy and every girl everywhere, those forces of spiritual wickedness are determined that it will not happen in the United States of America, that it would be pushed back. That's the meaning of the motto, making America great again. Making America great again. What, slavery was a great period of life? The hanging of women in 1637 as witches in Salem, Massachusetts and elsewhere was greatness. The decimating 11 or more million indigenous population until in less than 200 years they were all on open air concentration camps. That's greatness. The Civil War represents greatness. Not at all. So the Rosa Parks ignition was the development of the emerging of what I now call the nonviolent movement of America, or if we would, the soul force movement of the United States. Because her strength of character became the sort of key that pulled the feelings of many people together and her colleague and friend Mary Jo Robinson, at the first notice of Rosa Parks' arrest on December the 1st, 1955, spent the night mimeographing 8 by 11 sheets, which she cut in two, and she and a number of her friends all night long did this, so that on Saturday morning they were starting to pass out these leaflets around the Montgomery area saying, let's boycott on Monday, the 5th of December. They thought it would only be a one-day boycott. They met Monday afternoon, and there they decided to form a structure to run the boycott, to make it happen. But that movement and that dimension of the movement, I maintain, was a beginning place. Now, nonviolence is a good way to talk about love. That is the love of God, the love of life, the love of one another, the love that many of us have met in our families from the very beginning. That's my case. Indeed. Gandhi said, in fact, when he coined the term nonviolence, so Gandhi can be called the father of nonviolence, but not the inventor. He can be called the father of the science of nonviolence, and most people don't recognize we have today sufficient evidence, sufficient theses, axioms that can be documented. We have a sufficient history of the 20th century alone that, yes, ought to verify the reality that when you're in trouble with a social scene or emotional scene in family or congregation or union or city or campus, you do not have to imitate that social scene in its wrongness. That in fact, to do that is to escalate the wrong and to give the wrong a victory over yourself and over others. This is a part of the cardinal principle that Gandhi and others raised. It is a science of how you resist and you fight back. Take, for example, the present stage of great activism in the United States. But let me suggest to you that too much of the activism is for the sake of activism and not for the sake of changing ourselves and changing our land. Too much of it. So that in these marches that have been going on, where people are wearing the Percy hat, or where some signs appear, he is not my president, that reflects the opposition. It does not reflect a struggle that's going to offer new glimpses of the country that does not yet exist. Ends and means, Gandhi said, must be consonant. They are part of one another. But a more ancient figure, Jesus said, you can't get grapes from a thistle bush, nor figs from a thorn bush. And Gandhi suggested that it is in social history, in personal history, laws, whatever you want to call them, but laws like the law of gravitation. You break the law, you sow the consequences, you gain the consequences. That indeed, we need to remember something of the 20th century, that we fly today, not because of breaking the laws of force or power or wind or gravitation, but because we obey them. And the same is true in matters of social political events. There is no way our nation, with 800 military bases in more than 100 countries in the world, can through those military bases create a better world, a safer world, or a world that includes every boy and girl anywhere in the world. No way that can happen, for the method itself has within it the seeds of self-destruction. And surely it's time for us in our land to be rid of the enemy that is called violence and the enemy that is called war. And one of the ways in which I broke with some of the peace movement efforts in the 60s and 70s is this, that I did not see war as the major tragedy for this country and its wars and rumors of wars. I saw domestic violence, racist violence, the violence of structures of injustice, the violence of saying to ordinary people, you work, but you do not deserve adequate pay for your work. Little pay is enough. You don't need more than that. So I would come then to the forces of spiritual wickedness that want our society to go towards tyranny, and I do not say fascism deliberately, because it's our homegrown tyranny, our homegrown oppression, our homegrown injustice. Four forces that influence American policy and practice more than we know and help to cause the confusion and turmoil. Racism, sexism, violence, and plantation capitalism. These are the four. Each of them can be talked about for quite a bit of time, but all of them share two major elements. First of all, they share the element which insists that some people are not human and should not be treated as human. That some people are not equal, and therefore they should be subjugated to the rest of us. Each has a mythology that is very ancient in our own country. The mythology, the only Indian, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. Violence shares that mythology that certain people cannot understand ordinary human concourse. The only way they can be managed or controlled is through violence. Sexism shares the ideology that more than half of the Homo sapiens species is inferior to the other portion. Plantation capitalism takes the point of view that a slave is not a human being. A slave needs no attention in humane and loving forms. A slave is property. A slave is a piece of wealth. All across our land, under the power of plantation capitalism, we have extreme disparages of economic justice. In California, a year or so ago, lawyers won cases in the courts that called for employers to pay ordinary working people $26 million of back wages that they were not paying. This is not just true for California, it's epidemic. Our present economic scene insists that some people should only earn a mittance, not a living wage, not benefits, not sufficient economic well-being from their work that they can care for themselves and for their families, and they can care for the environment in which they live. They can work as full human beings to create a sustaining world, a sustaining nation. That's plantation capitalism. When a year ago, the unions of unions of California got a $15 minimum wage in various places in public life and so forth and so on, the opponents were almost entirely the Chamber of Commerce, business, big business. who could not see and did not sense that to be a democratic society, there must be economic justice, economic opportunity, economic access. Poverty as a structure of oppression must be dealt with and wiped out. Homelessness and shelterlessness, living in the streets, is a product of modern society which we do not need and which we are smart enough and wealthy enough and ingenuine enough to abolish and dismiss. But instead we tolerate it because we are still too much in the mythology of plantation capitalism. These four forces are the bitter enemies. These four forces are what produced Donald J. Trump as President of the United States. He is the embodiment of the worst of the American experience, not the best. He is the personification of what tyranny is about. And you cannot fight tyranny with more tyranny. You have to learn a new language. And the language we need to learn is that the community of people who want change must somehow learn the language of compassion and community and understanding one with another. What is the value of having struggle people who say he's not our president? Only if, therefore, we refuse to accept our democratic process and spirit and experiment, whether I like it or not. Racism, sexism, violence, plantation capitalism represent our inheritance as USA people. No, we did not make those decisions 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or 300 years ago, 400 years ago, but we live now with the consequences of our past. We don't need to feel guilty about it. We just need to try to understand in the most profound way that we've inherited it, and we need to change it in our own lifetime for the distance that we can go. The King movement, the Rosa Parks movement, the Fannie Lou Hamer campaign represents the hope of our country. Soul Force, the force of truth, the force of love, the power of the Spirit. It is these elements that represent the untapped power of the human family to discover itself and to discover the countries that we need that do not yet exist. And so I'm going to wrap up very quickly with one final paragraph. Martin Luther King Jr.'s final book was called Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? This fundamental question of the struggle that he represented and led so very, very well and strategized in it for 13 years. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And what King was saying in that book was something like this, that society will become more chaotic unless we see the truth of the nonviolent movement of America, using Congressman John Lewis's words. Unless the USA sees the vision, the power, the energy, and the truth, and the justice of the nonviolent struggle in the United States, the country will simply increase its own turmoil and chaos. And so the challenge for each one of us this evening is on which side we're going to be. Struggle may be chaotic. I recognize that through 17 or 18 or 20 various campaigns. But in the midst of the chaos, there is an energy and a purpose and a vision that again and again can help us see and feel and know that we're on the right trail for ourselves and for others. Chaos or community. If it's community, friends, then there is only one way. We have to find the language and the tools and the means to construct and build block by block community. Persons, family, immediate extended family, congregation, union, campus, and then campaigns that can embrace all of Fresno, campaigns that can help to lead the way for the movements that we need in the 21st century, that we must have if our nation is to exist, but not just to exist, but to find itself at its best in the experiment, that we hold these truths that all are created equal. Each one of us has the gift of life. Biologists from the 20th century have written that each of us has in us the debris of the Big Bang, the debris of the very beginning of our galaxy, our universe. A well-known biologist by the name of Ernst Mayr has said that in the 4 to 5 billion years of existence of the Earth, some 50 billion living species have existed. We are destroying them incidentally at the rate of about 100,000 every year, every 50 years or so, I'm told. But Meyer says that of these 50 billions of living species, the human species is the only one that has learned to sing and dance in language and create intimate families, raise children to be fully human. The only species that has learned to fly, to build skyscrapers, to build houses, and the rest of it. Well, that speaks to me of the power of the gift of life that each one of us represents. And at the heart of nonviolent power is the power in your own soul and life. What Gandhi called the will, the capacity to determine that in the midst of evil, I will walk humbly with compassion and care. In the midst of chaos, I will know who I am, and I will make who I am significant for my own life and the life of my family and others. In the midst of racism, I will be a non-racist. I will be a sister or a brother of everyone around me and of all humankind. In the midst of sexism, I will tear off the chauvinism that is hurting the debate in public life in our land so very, very much. And I will be a person who knows full well the equality and the necessity of all human life, both genders, all genders. In the midst of injustice, I will work for justice. When I see the hungry, I will want to see politics and policies that feed the hungry, not feed the bomb. When I hear hate slurs, I will try to respond with care and humanity. That means I will live, each of us, as a citizen of a country that does not yet exist. I will live with other human options than the one of the status quo. Not because I expect to be effective or successful, but because I want to be alive and human and full of the energy of living. Thank you.